Hello, Christina and fellow classmates. Welcome to my math lesson for the strand of data management and probability created for a grade 5 classroom. Before I talk about my lesson plan, I wanted to explain what our group's focus was. We wanted to conduct our 3-part math lesson with a focus on collaboration and a real-life connection. For the consolidation, we wanted to do a math community/math congress discussion where students are the facilitators of their learning with our guidance. Before beginning the writing process on this lesson plan, the first thing we had to do was choose the grade. So we chose grade 5 as some of us in the group have had previous experience with teaching. I have not had the opportunity to teach grade 5 in any of my teaching blocks, so for myself it was somewhat new looking at the mathematics curriculum for this grade. As a personal preference, I wanted to focus on data management as opposed to probability. So I started the process by looking at the curriculum expectations and seeing what I would enjoy writing a lesson on. So I chose this expectation: collect data by conducting a survey or an experiment to do with themselves, their environment, issues in their school or community, or content from another subject, and record observations or measurements. So I thought this expectation was fitting because as a group we decided to tie in a real-life connection. So after reading the expectation, I knew that my focus for this lesson had to be on creating a survey and having students collect data and recording it. My problem was I didn't know what kind of survey or question I wanted to ask them. So my next step was to look at resources that we have used in this course, and I referred to the Data Management and Probability, a Guide to Effective Instruction manual for grades 4 to 6. I luckily had a physical copy on hand that I have kept in my collection of resources from school, so I turned to the grade 5 lesson found on page 68. I read parts of the lesson plan and liked the context for which the task was to be presented to students. So the context said this: tell students that a school, or your school if you wanted, wants to purchase some outdoor equipment for the school's daily physical activity program. The school principal, who will be presenting the case at a budget meeting, needs information that will help determine which equipment to buy and will also provide justification for the course. After reading this, it immediately reminded me of my volunteer experience where the classroom teacher was researching and applying for grants to purchase new netbooks for her classroom as a part of her research on the benefits of technology in her classroom. So I then thought of this experience and reworded the question with the same context of the idea of purchasing new technological equipment for the school. So here's the structure of my lesson. So I created my task to ask the students in the Minds On section of the lesson plan. I knew I had to figure out something to be done before introducing the task. I'm just trying to move the section here for you so it can balance out with what I'm saying. So before introducing the task that I was going to have them do for the lesson, I wanted to poll the students to ask if they've ever taken a survey or know what a survey was. So in my lesson plan, I stated to have them do a fist of 5 strategy. So this strategy was introduced to me through a workshop I took in Teachers College. So the instructor of that workshop introduced this strategy to gain some knowledge from us of what we knew and what we didn't know about a topic. So for the fist of 5 strategy, if your students have not heard of something or have no experience, they put a fist in the air, which is represented as 0. They don't know anything about it and they'd like to know more. So if they do know about something in depth and have experience with it and are extremely comfortable with the topic and are comfortable with explaining it to someone else, then they hold up all 5 fingers. So anything in between, you would explain to them to use their judgment. So a 4, raising 4 fingers, would represent having experience or knowledge and are comfortable with the topic. Raising 3 fingers, they have somewhat experience and knowledge and know a few things about it. 2 fingers, where they heard about a topic, maybe know 1 or 2 things. And 1 finger, where they have heard of a topic but don't know much about it and would like to know more. So this strategy is obviously a rating system where you can see what students know about something or don't, and you can record their response as per your anecdotal notes as your observations. So after this prior knowledge technique, I would present a bar graph on the board and give students a cue card and instruct them to write a survey question that would say something about the data that's presented in that graph. So this would be collected and then I would use it as my diagnostic assessment to see what my students know. So once this is collected, I would introduce the context for the lesson and describe the task to students. So let me just move down here in the lesson plan. So obviously you would tell them the scenario that I have here in the lesson plan. At first, I wanted this lesson to be a group collaboration, but as I continued writing, I felt that it would be too complicated when it came to assessing the group. So I figured making it both a collaborative and individual focused lesson would be beneficial as students can work as a team, but then take the data that they collected and place it into a graph or representation of their choosing. In the end, it would be easier to assess the individual than the group. It would also make it easier when it comes down to doing the Congress community in the consolidation of the lesson, to choose the student work that you want to be presented at the end and to be the focus or center of discussion. So I definitely thought it would be best to choose the groups beforehand and creating mixed ability groups so that it's fair. You definitely should pair your higher level students with lower level students and perhaps students with other kids in the class that they're not used to working with. That could also be a good opportunity to see what kind of relationships they can build. I don't think I wrote this in my lesson plan, but you can have them each write a survey question in the group and then have them collectively agree on which one is best to use when surveying others. I definitely love incorporating technology into a lesson in some way or another, so I figured you can either let your students come up with ways on how they would get their survey out to the other classes that wouldn't be disruptive, or you could decide as a group which avenue you would want to take. So you could always discuss the pros and cons of each method with your students. I thought, in keeping with the idea of a real life connection, I could have them brainstorm a way that is eco-friendly that would produce accurate results. So definitely you want to hope to lead them to an online program of some sort. So in here, in this lesson plan, I talked about Google Forms where they can actually write down the survey question and you can share the link with whoever you want. So you could definitely send the link to other teachers in the division. Ideally, I would want to see what my students come up with so that it could provide a lot of dialogue when it comes to the consolidation section. In terms of the anticipated student responses, I feel as though some students would want to go to each class and take a tally of votes. An example that came up in my placement, a couple of students from the other classes came into mine hoping for a few minutes to complete what they were doing in their class that was survey related. And that cut into my own class time, which I personally would not want to send my students to disrupt another class. I think there's always a better alternative to collecting data. Maybe other groups would want to create their own survey handout, and then I would photocopy them as the teacher and distribute them to the other classes. And we could let them know an allotted time frame to have the survey completed and returned. Again, as the teacher, I would want to have a consultation with the groups to see how they would want to collect their data. Once they have collected the data, then each student breaks from their group and then completes the individual portion of the lesson where they need to figure out a way to display the data they collected as a group. So they need to analyze the data and interpret the results. So students should have already had prior knowledge and experience with different types of charts and graphs. Some in particular are bar graphs, double bar graphs, broken line graphs, stem and leaf plots that can display information. So giving your students the ability to choose the type of representation will show you how students think. So personally, I cannot see the benefit of a broken line graph as this shows a variation, so an increase or decrease over time. And the task doesn't ask for something that is time-based, so I wouldn't anticipate students to choose this type of graph. However, if they did, it would be a great example to talk about during the Math Congress at the end of the lesson. The survey question they ask will be about the type of technological equipment students in the junior division want more of. So I would say a bar graph would work well, and same with maybe a double bar graph if students decided to compare our class with the other classes in the division and what their choices were. Throughout the action component of the lesson, I would have provided them with a rubric as a guideline to what I'm looking for. As teachers, our goal is to work towards student achievement, and the best way to do that is to provide them with your expectations ahead of time of what you're assessing them on. So we definitely want to set our students up for success, not failure, pardon me there. We definitely want to be able to assist those who are not achieving and look for ways to promote growth in their learning. So this leads into differentiated instruction and any accommodations or modifications you will need to make for students. So if you have students who are struggling to write, you can provide them assistance and be their scribe or even accept verbal communication, especially if students have a difficult time outputting information. So I won't lie, I had a difficult time developing this lesson plan because I had so many ideas running around in my mind that I had difficulty relaying it on paper, or in this case in a Word document. I just had writer's block and had no idea where I wanted to start. So you may also have students in your class who need to use assistive technology, and that's okay. In terms of the consolidation of the lesson, let me just move this here. I would set up my classroom for a gallery walk. That's also something our group at the beginning decided that we wanted to include in the consolidation along with the community/congress. So setting up your classroom for a gallery walk, having students look around at the different representations of the data they collected based off of one survey question. As they were going around, I thought it would be a good idea to take a picture of their work on the iPad for reference. You could upload their work onto Google Classroom and have parents take a look at their hard work that their children have been working on that week. My main purpose, though, for taking pictures were to place it on the smartboard or projector so that when you were analyzing student work, everyone can see the example and pinpoint areas for discussion. This not only will have an effect on the auditory learners in the classroom, but benefit the visual learners as well, as it will make it easier for them to follow along in the discussion. The big idea, I'm just going to move it down here. The big idea I want students to take away is that doing statistics is a part of mathematics, even if they don't physically do any equations or work with any of the operations in math. So I found myself questioning at one point if what I was writing in this lesson had anything to do with mathematics. But it does, I realize this, because this strand supports the mathematical process of reasoning and proving. So as the curriculum states, it enables students to make sense of the mathematics they are learning. It also says that students should be encouraged to reason from the evidence they find in their explorations. So I want students to understand that doing statistics involves 4 components: formulating questions, collecting data, analyzing that data, and interpreting results. Their interpretation of the results of this lesson and then placing their findings in a chart or a graph supports the process of reasoning, because students will then be asked, why did they choose that graph? Or why did they choose the chart, or however they presented their information? Finally, the independent task that I chose was having them analyze the data in the graph provided, so I did provide a link there. They were also, in this independent task, they're asked certain questions that accompany the graph, and another thing that you can have them do is have them create a survey question that might have been asked before that data collection process began in accordance with that graph that's presented there. I found this task on the online version of Nelson's Mathematics, the grade 5 textbook. This task will show me whether or not students have understood the components of the lesson. So I just want to thank you for listening. I hope that you can see my thought process for this lesson and how I wanted to set my students up for success. I hope that this lesson could be used in your classrooms one day. I definitely will keep this in my resources, and if I end up teaching a grade 5 classroom on data management and probability, this would definitely be one of the lessons I would refer to. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email me. So thanks again. Bye-bye.